And we're back, baby, with another N85 podcast. As you can tell, I have a giant red solo cup for Halloween. How do y'all fucking with that, huh? This took me a long ass time to make. It seems pretty easy, and I made it myself, but it's not as easy as it seems, bro. I look goofy. Look at this. I can't even stick my hands out. That's how big this thing is. I have to keep the mic in here. So I don't know, but we're gonna roll. Before the episode starts, because this is the Halloween special, as you can tell, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. I said on the last episode, I was like, yo, okay, we're going to try to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. And dude, we literally fucking blew past that in like a week, which is crazy as fuck. So now, and we're approaching 200 by the time of this episode. So now the new goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm reaching big. I'm reaching for the stars, but I think it's possible, bro. That is the new goal. So if y'all can, please subscribe to the channel right now. And while you're at it, make sure to go give us a 5-star on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That would be very great. So basically, I was like, okay, I need to make a Halloween special. Like, what kind of, you know what I'm saying? What kind of a podcaster would I be if I didn't make a Halloween special? You know what I'm saying? So I was like, okay, let me first of all dress up. Yeah, you know the fucking vibe, son. But also, let me pick out a subject, right? That I think is like awesome, that I'm like, yo, that I genuinely like fuck with, right? And I was like, damn, what do I actually fuck with that, like, you know, I can talk about for, you know, an extended period of time, and also throw out some fucking knowledge, boom, 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 boom. I was like, yo, UFOs, bro. I'm fascinated by UFOs. Everything about UFOs, I'm like, yo, I know all the stories. I listen to the podcast, you know, all the conspiracy shit. I'm into it deep. So I'm like, all right, bet. I'm gonna research my top. Well, I was gonna do top 3. But not really. So basically, the way I formatted this podcast, right, was that I chose my one credible UFO encounter sighting kind of vibe, right? The story, right? But I chose 2 other ones to say in front of them that kind of give context and lead up to it. You guys will see. It'll all make sense by the end. So make sure you stick to the end. I'm going to say the ones that I'm doing right now. So the first one that I'm doing, right, is the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. And basically that was the first ever recorded modern era like UFO sighting, you know what I'm saying? The second one is called the Roswell incident. Now that's probably the most famous one here in the United States, so I have to cover that. But that also kind of like goes into what I'm, you know, my OG one. So the OG one is called the Varginha UFO incident. That's what it's called, literally. It sounds fucking, you know, it sounds a little sus, but that's literally what it's called. And yeah, but before I start that off, right, since it's spooky season, I wanted to start it off with a little spooky story of myself, you know what I'm saying? I will note that before the podcast start, right, I actually don't believe in none of that shit, bro. None of the spooky shit. Ghosts, demons, spirits, chupacabras, marriage, none of that shit that you're supposed to believe in. I don't believe in none of that shit, all right? None of it. So don't come with me in this fucking comments saying like, oh, like, nah, bro, I don't believe in none of that bullshit. But having said that, aliens is the only exception. And you're going to see why, bro. If you're not convinced by the end of this podcast that aliens are real and this shit actually happened, bro, I fucking failed. And I'm genuinely like 100% certain that I could convince anybody that's watching and tuning in right now that this shit actually happened and is real, all right? Now, before that I get into the actual like UFO shit and all that, I want to talk about my own spooky scenario too that I had in my own life, you know, my spooky experience. Now, I said that I didn't believe in that shit, but that doesn't mean that I, like everybody else probably watching, right, I had a spooky experience. So my incident occurred when I was like around 9-ish years old and shit like that. And if you're a listener of the podcast, you know that I used to live like in apartments when I was a youngin', right? And in these apartments, bro, my parents left me alone one night, right? And at this point, I had my own room and everything, so it was fucking lit, you know what I'm saying? I didn't have to share a room with nobody. Like, it was all good, right? So I was home alone. It was probably like 10 p.m. and shit, and I don't know what the fuck I was doing. Probably watching TV, right? Whatever the fucking a 9 and 10-year-old is doing at that time, you know what I'm saying? Not no weird shit. And then out of nowhere, I hear a knock, right? Somewhat faint, but I still heard it. But it was the front door. And I was like, okay, you know, my room is like directly like a hallway from the front door, you know what I'm saying? As soon as I step out my room, I can literally see the front door, right? So I was like, okay, you know what? Let me go see who it is, obviously, like any normal human being. So I walk to the front door, I open it, and there's nobody there. I'm like, yo, like, nobody's here, right? So in my head, you obviously think the more logical thing, which is like, oh, I just got fucking dinged on ditch, like, damn, that fucking blows, you know what I'm saying? But whatever, let me keep it pushing, let me just go back inside, right? So I go back inside. I go inside my room and I lay back on my bed and shit, just vibing out. And then like 2 minutes passes by, right? And then out of nowhere, boom, 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 loud as fuck. But this time it was on my fucking like bedroom door, bro. Like that's insane. I remember, and like before anybody says like, oh, maybe somebody fucking came inside your house, like that's impossible, bro. When I opened the door, I literally closed it and I locked it. That's when I used to lock doors. I don't lock my doors no more. So if anybody's trying to pull up. Actually, I got an automatic lock, so y'all are fucked. But anyways, I was literally fucking so frightened, bro. I was like frozen. I was like, yo, what is this? What is happening right now? Like my heart started fucking racing, like exponentially going up. I was like, yo, I'm not equipped to handle a ghost right now, bro. What am I doing? So then I was like, okay, in my head I was like, bro, I have literally two options: hide under my fucking bed like any normal kid would do, or just fucking go out, swing in, and if there's nothing there, just fucking dip, like run outside my fucking house. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, nah, bro, if I stay here, the ghost is gonna like, it's gonna be like a horror movie, right? The ghost is gonna open the door slowly, and then like I'm under my bed, right, and I see some fucking pasty ass, no melanin ass feet walking along the side of my fucking bed, and then face me, and then you know how it goes, bro. Boom, a fucking ghost just pulls me out, like pulls me out of my fucking bed, and I'm over with. I'm fucking sushi. I'm ghost sushi. So I was like, nah, bro, I'm fucking running out, right? So I fucking just open my door, bro, and just sprint, bro. Don't check who it is, what it is. I'm like, I'm gone, son. I am living today. So I get out of my house, bro, close it. And then I fucking run to my neighbors, right? He lives like diagonal to me, right? It was my homie Daniel. Shout out my boy Daniel. The Peruvians. And then I was like banging on their door. I was like, yo. And they came out there like, yo, like they see me all startled and shit. Now at this point I'm fucking crying, bro, because this shit is like traumatizing. I was like, bro, how did this happen? This is not like, this is impossible, right? I was like, bro, I just had some spooky ass shit happen to me. I explained to them the story. I was like, dude, nobody's in my house. Nobody could have been in my house this whole time. I have nobody that would like prank me like that would like sneak inside my house and then knock my door. I was like, bro, somebody knocked on my bedroom door, bro, like loud, like boom, boom, boom. And so I had to like come over here, and he was like, what the fuck? And these are church people too, so they're like, you know, on the skeptical side, they're trying to find all the like logical explanations to what the fuck just happened and all that. I was like, dude, there's no logical explanation, bro. Some shit just happened, right? And then I literally just stayed there like the whole night. My parents were out fucking partying or some bullshit. They didn't get home till like 2 a.m. And then they came and got me and shit, and I explained to them the story. I was still frightened at that point. And they were just saying like, oh, probably somebody knocked on the door, and then they fucking, maybe a gust of wind is literally what they said. Well, they didn't say a gust of wind, but they said like the force of them knocking on the front door was so big that it like moved my door. But I was like, nah, mate, ain't no fucking way that shit, like, my door banged. Like, you can see that shit physically moving. Like, you know what I'm saying? I was like, nah, bro, that shit, I don't know. And to this day, I still have no explanation as to what happened, like, in that scenario, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's a spooky ass shit. And you would think that would make me, like, believe in, like, fucking ghosts and paranormal shit. You know what I'm saying? Nah, it doesn't, bro. Like, that shit, like, it's just a memory in my head. I don't think about it. I still walk around in the dark. I'm not scared of the dark, by the way. I know that's like a common fear for a lot of people. Not me, bro. So, but enough of that, right? We're gonna get into the UFO shit now. And I think that the best way to do this is to start off by the first ever UFO encounter recorded by, like, you know, the US and in modern era is what they describe it, you know what I'm saying? So this one is called the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. So this one occurred on June 24th, 1947. And you might be wondering, like, okay, it's called Kenneth Arnold. Who the fuck is Kenneth Arnold? It's literally nobody, bro. It's just a random ass pilot that just happened to fucking see some crazy ass shit, right? And like I said, this is like the first ever like sighting in modern like era, right? People were obviously like, you know, freaked out about this shit. So basically what happened, right? He was out in the middle of bumblefuck nowhere, right? South of Seattle, somewhere in Washington, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. It's called like Mount Rainier or some bullshit. And basically what he saw, right, was 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects, UFOs, you know what I'm saying? Now, this man claimed that these like flying objects, right, were flying at a like approximately 1,200 miles per hour. Now you're like, well, how the fuck, like, how do you even see that shit? Because that's fucking fast, bro. I don't know how fast an airplane fucking flies. I should have probably done that research, but pretty fucking fast, right? Now the peculiar thing, there's 2 things that are really odd from his story, right? Number 1 was the shape of the flying objects. He described it as like kind of boomerang. So I'm gonna put up a picture, boom boom boom, right there, right? it looks like a fucking like boomerang had sex with the fucking Batman logo, if I'm being honest. Like, that's the only way I could describe it. And if you're on fucking Spotify, you can look it up. It's called Kenneth Arnold, and just look up the fucking shape or whatever. And now number 2, right, the peculiar shit was the way that the fucking flying saucers, whatever, the way that they flew. So you would think, right, the way it's shaped, like you saw how like it was shaped, right? You would think it'd fly like a zoom, like a linear kind of, like, you know what I'm saying? That's aerodynamically like what you would expect. But these ones actually flew like boom, 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 like bunny hop. Like, the way that they described it was like skipping rocks, you know what I'm saying, across the lake. You see, you know how like you know, it skips. So that's the way that they described that this shit was flying, which blows my fucking mind. How the fuck, you know what I'm saying? How is that aerodynamically, like, you know, and this is a pilot, you know what I'm saying? Like, you would know, like, how the fuck is this even happening? Now, after this incident came out, America was just like, what the fuck? Like, we never heard of such a thing, you know what I'm saying? And you might be thinking like, oh, well, this is 1947. Like, how did they not hear about shit before? You know, like, a lot of people tend to think about like the ancient civilizations and shit. You see like in the pyramids and all that, you see like little saucer looking symbols in their shit, which that might be true, you know what I'm saying? They might believe in that shit, but modern era, like, this is what like spiraled people out of control in this time. Now, after this, they received numerous reports about like all this shit happening that they see themselves. They're like, oh, I see a fucking UFO now. Oh, now that's basically the story, right? It was just a random guy that happened to stumble up on a sighting. He was like, oh, what the fuck? 9 shiny objects flying in the sky, skipping, boom, boom. Now, do I think this is a crock of shit? I genuinely think so. And let me tell you why. Number 1, so this man released a bunch of like articles and books. He published like countless ass shit. And like, you know what I'm saying? It's like a clout play. That's what I like, you know, see it. You know what I'm saying? Not even a clout play. It was a money play. By doing this, that you would assume like, damn, this is probably a money play, right? Like, he'll probably have a bunch of fucking copies of his books, probably sell them, get some autographs, even get some fucking clout out of it. You know what I'm saying? And that leads me to my number 2, the clout. So a couple years later, like down his life and shit, he started running for like politics and shit. So yeah, I think he ran for the governor of Idaho, if I'm not mistaken. And guess what? This man was a Republican. Oh, hell yeah, bro. You know what I'm saying? Now, what did I think that this did for the U.S. at this time? Well, I believe that this caused like panic in the, you know, in the public. You know what I'm saying? It made them think like, oh shit, he saw something. Let me go up there and look for some shit. So they probably see some shooting stars, maybe some fucking, I don't know, did they have planes at that time? I don't even know, bro. I'm not familiar with my history. But, you know, they see shit in the sky and they're like, oh, this has to be a UFO, you know? That motherfucker over there in Washington saw some bullshit. Like, obviously, this is that. So, I think that that's what that, like, you know, caused for people. And I don't think that this shit was true. I think he was just doing it as a clout play, money play. And maybe if he did see some shit, you know what I'm saying? It might have been some explainable shit. I mean, I don't know, you know? So now that leads me to the Roswell incident, right? So in the beginning of July in 1947, so literally like a month later, bro, this shit started happening. So this happened near Roswell, New Mexico, right? And let me tell you something. So this man named Mac, right? He was a farmer. He was a local farmer, just, you know, a normal, everyday, you know, human being around this fucking area, right? He saw what he believed like was a crash, you know what I'm saying? He was like, what the fuck? Let me go see what the fuck's happening, right? So he pulls up and he sees a bunch of like debris all over the floor and shit. He's like, what the hell? So then he's like, yo, what do I do with all this like debris and shit? Should I, you know, take it home? What should I do with it? So what he decides to do is like gather some of it up, right? And then he takes it to the sheriff's office. And that sheriff then takes it to the fucking like Air Force. They're like, all right, we need to see what the fuck this is. Like, I don't know what this is. So then the Air Force, right, they obviously got to send somebody. So they send this colonel over to assess like the damage, assess like the debris and all that. See what it is, you know what I'm saying? Why is it there? So of course, like shit like this ends up leaking, right? Because like the Air Force and shit and all the military people, they start making moves and all that. And obviously the press is gonna like gain sight of this. They're like, oh, I see what the fuck y'all doing. This is not normal shit around here. Why the fuck y'all moving kind of weird? So then they start releasing, so like they kind of know, they see like he's going to these places, boom, boom. So then they kind of release this like report saying like, oh, they got a flying saucer and shit, like they're doing some crazy shit with like aliens, they captured an alien and all this shit. So then obviously the military had to cover their own ass. They're like, oh well, no, they released their own statement. Obviously they're like, no, what we found was like a fucking weather balloon and it just happened to crash and shit. We released all these all across the sky. So after the military released their statement, right, then Mac has to release his statement, the rancher, right? He said that all the things he found was just like, and let me get this correct, it was rubber strips tinfoil, and paper and sticks. That's literally what he said he found. I don't know how the fuck you make a weather balloon. It must have been a fucking failed gender reveal, but like that's what he found. That's what he claimed he found, or whatever. So then 1 year after this incident happened, there were still like people that were skeptic about this. They're like, well, what the fuck? Like, you know what I'm saying? You just left us on a cliffhanger. You expect us to believe that it was a weather balloon and shit. So there was this reporter, right? He went and interviewed Marcel. Now you're probably wondering, who the fuck is Marcel? Well, Marcel was that colonel. That's what that man was called. The colonel that went to assess the debris and all that shit, who ended up saying, like, you know, it was a weather balloon. He now changed his statement. He was like, nah, bro, that wasn't actually a weather balloon and shit. So what this man said, you'd be like, all right, bro, this man was smoking on that Mexican kush from across the border, bro. Because what he said was, the debris he found, when he picked it up in his hand, it felt like nothing was even there. Like, it was so light, but it was like thin, like aluminum foil and shit, but you couldn't even bend it. It was so strong. He said, in his own words, he said that if you hit it with a sledgehammer, the sledgehammer would just bounce the fuck off. You know what I'm saying? So you're like, yo, what the fuck is this man on, bro? Right? So then once that report came out, obviously, because, you know, this man has to, you know, send that shit out to the press and all that, the government was literally forced to make another statement. So now this one, they kind of changed it up a little bit. They said, okay, yeah, it wasn't a regular weather balloon or something like that. It was a little bit of a cover-up, but not what you guys think. So this weather balloon was designed to, like, detect nuclear tests carried out by the Soviet Union. Because at this time, I think it was just post-World War II. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that it was, like, the beginning of the Cold War and shit. So the Soviets might be fucking flexing their hard-ass nukes. So then all this shit just forced the government's hand again, bro. So then they had to, launch a re-investigation of the whole damn thing. And then basically what they ended up concluding, right? The government said that they ended up concluding was that Mac and Marcel, so the rancher and the colonel, were literally just tripping and shit. Like, they were just going off of the UFO hype that just happened, like, you know what I'm saying, recently with the fucking the Kenneth Arnold incident and shit like that. So they were saying, like, oh no, they just want some hype. Like, this shit is all fake. Like, it was just a weather balloon. Like, everybody fucking relax. So then, like, also reports came that, like, people were saying, oh no, we think that you guys also have a fucking alien body. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously they weren't convinced that it was just a weather balloon. They were like, nah, this is a fucking crash site of a ship. So with a ship, there also has to be a fucking, like, body, an alien, somebody driving that motherfucker, bro, whipping that shit around the galaxy, you know what I'm saying? And then the response that the government made was literally kind of like a dumb one. They were like, no. Around that time, you must have, like, confused it with some dummies, you know, some human-like dummies that we were testing out around the desert and shit like that. So basically what they were doing around that time was, like, they were testing out what the effects of parachuting would do on human beings. So they would fly across the desert and then drop some dummies, you know what I'm saying? It's like some plastic ass motherfuckers that look like and resembled human beings into the desert and shit. And they said that this is what people confuse them, you know, if they might have seen some shit like being carried out of there, that's what it was. So what made all this convincing was that they're like, I think it was reported that over like 600 witnesses witnessed this, like, some or all of this shit. And it was like ranging from classic civilians all the way into like high level military motherfuckers who, you know, later came forward and, like, you know, expressed their point of view and shit, and, you know, talk some shit. Now the government did release some pictures with that I will put up somewhere on the fucking screen and shit of, like, the wreckage, all the debris that they found. Now this shit looks super sus because, like, there's a lot of theories that claim that this shit was just a staged picture. They just threw out down a bunch of bullshit. The shit that they actually recovered, they didn't put it out in the picture, obviously, you know what I'm saying? So they put out all this shit, they staged a picture to fool the public into thinking, like, oh, this is what we found, and then everybody's like, oh, you know, it doesn't look that fucking spacey, you know what I'm saying? But the skeptics, no, they're like, you know what? That's not actually it. And a lot of people gave their fucking input on what the kind of alien that they saw or whatever. And a lot of people made, like, sketches of these, like, you know, descriptions and shit. And it is believed that, you know, that's where the fucking mainstream look of the alien that we know now, you know what I'm saying? The big head, little body, you know what I'm saying? Big eyes, little holes for nose, you know, all that shit. The shit that you think of when you think alien. Not you know, my cousin or something like that, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that is literally it for the Roswell incident. It was just, you know what I'm saying, a weather balloon or a fucking alien and shit like that. Now I say all this is rounded up as a fucking prequel to what I'm about to say, and that is the 1996 Varginha UFO crash in Brazil. And this one was fucking wild because a lot of people, this shit had so many witnesses, bruh. The other one did too, but all the stories like they somewhat line up, and it was different people that never ever met each other and shit, and they had similar stories of the fucking shit that happened on this day. Okay, so I'm gonna kick this one off with a story of a man named Carlos, right? And he was going down like a highway, right? And he came down to an intersection when he all of a sudden he hears like, you know, outside of his truck, like a muffling sound, and he's like, what the fuck? That's not my truck. So he kind of like goes to the side of the intersection, and he looks up. And then when he looks up, he looks at a fucking, like a blunt shaped fucking like spacecraft in the sky, you know what I'm saying? And he described that it was like 30 feet long, and it was literally flying like parallel to the fucking highway. So it was like going straight and shit. So he eventually decided to go like, you know, chase after. He's like, yo, what the fuck? Like, I need to see what the fuck this is. And he said that eventually it like crashed somewhere. He kind of like lost it for a bit, but he like drove in the direction where he thought it was gonna land, you know what I'm saying? He did this fucking has calculations in his fucking head. He was good at geometry. So then after a while of like looking for that shit, right, he like actually found, you know, where it was. But the crazy part was that there was already hella motherfuckers there, like military people, firemen, policemen, like a bunch of fucking random ass people there. So then he decided like, oh, I'm gonna just go fucking sneak up and then see what the fuck is it, like, you know, all this shit's about, what was, you know, what's happening. So it's like the other story, right, of the rancher. He sees some debris and shit, he picks it up. And what's crazy is that he described it almost the same way. He said that it was like super light. He was like, yo, this shit feels like nothing's in my hand. And then obviously fucking the people there are gonna see him. They're like, yo, what the fuck are you doing here? They asked him to leave, and he was like, oh, well, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna fucking leave. There's some men in black shit going on here. I'm gone, right? So then he pulls up to like a local coffee shop, like not too far from there, in Varginha, Brazil, right? And then not too long after that, like some like military ass dudes in suit pull up on him. They're like, hey, we know who you are. We saw that you were over there. Boom, boom, boom. You cannot say a word about this to anybody. And if you do, the consequences are going to be like, quote unquote, severe. They didn't say that they were going to like kill him and shit. But, you know, you can imagine, like, you know what I'm saying? I might get clocked for this shit. And that was basically it for, like, you know, his encounter and shit. He never fucking spoke to anybody after that. So then the following day, right, on January 20th, 1996, 3 girls, and let me get their names right. I have the names right here. I literally cannot pronounce this shit. Okay, so the 3 girls, right? Liliane, Valkyria, I don't know how the fuck to say that name, and Katya, right? They were all out in like a field and shit, and they described it like, oh, it was fucking raining like crazy, and the winds were crazy and shit. They were out in a field surrounded by like woods and shit, you know what I'm saying? And they saw like a small strange creature, like just like kind of like crouched over and shit. And the way they described it, it was like 5 feet tall. Let's see it right here. A large head, a very thin body, V-shaped feet, brown skin. They're describing my cousin, large red eyes, and then 3 small horns on his head. And I've seen a picture. I'll put a picture of like the description that they said right up on the screen right now. It's not really like horns, but they're like kind of like protrusions, like, you know, in the head. That's as good as I can describe it if you're just listening to the podcast. But yeah, I'll put a picture out on the screen. And then they said that whenever they kind of like interacted with it, right? They kind of like, I think that they screamed or something like that. They described that it was threatening, like it was kind of like shy and like hurt and shit. So when they like screamed, it didn't make it like, it didn't like react or nothing, or didn't like, you know, try to fight them. It just kind of hit the, and it just like looked over at them and shit with its fucking red eyes and shit. So then they dipped. They're like, fuck that, I'm gone, bro. They did what anybody should have done in that situation, bro. I'm seeing this little shit, I'm gone, son. So then they go to their house, right? And then they tell their mom, they're like, yo, we just saw some wild ass shit over there. Somebody's wilding over there. And then they're obviously, you know, as a grown woman, their mom's like, nah, I just saw some crazy shit. It was just a figment of your imagination. You know, it was windy. It was storming outside. Like, you know what I'm saying? Y'all could have seen some random shit. But eventually they got her to go. They got her to go like out into the fucking field and shit and take a look at what just like, you know, what they were looking at. And the crazy part is, right, when they got there, like the creature was gone. The only thing left was a smell of like ammonium. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you know, ammonia is like some cleaning supply shit, just a strong fucking ass smell. And then later they were like, dude, I think we just saw like a demon, like some demon hellspawn bullshit, like, you know what I'm saying? So the girls and their mother eventually only found like footprints and shit. That's all they found, no body or nothing. Later in life, these 3 girls were eventually located by like a reporter and shit, and he like interviewed them again, like as adults, like grown adults. And the crazy part is that they stuck to their story, bro. Nothing changed, no contradictions or nothing, bro. And like they were even getting emotional and shit. They were saying like, yo, it affected our lives and shit, that people didn't believe us. They thought we were crazy. people in school, our own family, they treated us like we were just crazy and shit like that. Now, while this was going on, there was also some local people like nearby witnessing shit like this shit happening, right? So there was this like story about like this couple that said that they saw some military people come by and like capture some shit and put it into like a bag and then load it up in their truck. Later, a police officer named Marco, right, he released like a statement later down the line, a couple years later and shit. He said that he came across the creature. He said that this thing like looked like injured and shit. He didn't know what it was, right? But he said it looked injured and hurt and shit. So he like literally picked it up bare hands, bro, bare hands. And then he took it to a small clinic. So then when he got inside the clinic, right, he went inside, he was like, yo, like, look at this shit, bro. Somebody help me with this. And the doctors were like, yo, get that shit out of here. They literally said it was like a demon, like a devil. They were like, nah, we're not treating that. I don't know what the fuck that is. Take that shit and get out of here, bro. After that, he eventually just took it. He's like, fuck it, I'm gonna just take it to the city and take it to an actual hospital. So the crazy part, now this is where things get really fucking crazy, right? So after a couple days, Marco ended up coming like to the hospital himself. He like admitted himself into the hospital because he was really fucking sick. He came in with a high ass fever. His arms didn't work, his legs didn't work, and he couldn't like even feed himself and shit. And the crazy part is that a month later, after he admitted himself into the hospital, he actually fucking died, bro. And the crazy part is that the government like were being so sus about it. They said that he needed to be buried immediately, that his casket needed to be shut. Nobody could attend that shit. Like, it was crazy. And they gave his family no answers. They like said like, yo, what was his cause of death and shit, and they did not like give him, they didn't give him a response or nothing like that. That is so sus, you know what I'm saying? So now this is where shit gets crazy with that story, right? The doctor that actually like cared for him and everything, right, he later came like clean and said Marco on his deathbed, the one thing he said was that he was involved in the capturing of an extraterrestrial alien, bro. That's so crazy, right? Imagine someone, because that's the crazy part, right? You're dying, and usually when you're in your deathbed and shit, I'm assuming, right? I've never been on deathbed, but like, you would just confess to like the crazy shit you did. I kissed my cousin. I did this gay shit. No, like you confess like your real shit, right? But like, he said like, yo, I was involved in the capturing of a fucking alien, bro. Like, that's literally the last words, and then dead as fuck, bro. That doctor was the last person he saw, and he decided to admit that shit to him. That's crazy, right? Okay, so now let's move on to the POV of the nurses, right? Because there was nurses and doctors and shit all involved into this hospital where this ET was taken, right? So a lot of them claimed like that it was just a regular ass day. Like they like, it was nothing crazy about the day, right? But then like all of a sudden a bunch of military officials, firemen, policemen, and the crazy part is, right, in Brazil all these people work for the government, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're all considered military government officials and shit. And then they said that like them and then some doctors and shit, they started closing off a certain section of the hospital where they were all going. And they even said that like they saw a bunch of doctors from like other cities, like nearby cities and shit, like doctors that didn't work at that hospital. So that's so weird, right? Why is there like military people and then other doctors that are not supposed to be here? So now what makes this super sus, right, is that like the hospital administrators, right, the higher ups in the hospital, they eventually made a meeting for all the doctors and nurses and shit that were there that day, and they basically said like, yo, you cannot tell nobody what you saw today. Nothing happened. This is all part of a military and doctors exercise to like, you know, see I guess like, you know, training if this ever needed to happen, whatever, you know, this is what we were doing today. Like, and if anybody ever asks questions, you're not allowed to answer any questions and shit like that. It's like, I guess, illegal or against the law or against code of the hospital or whatever. So then later in life, right, another officer that was there that day came clean. He was like, yo, on that day we actually captured 2 creatures. So I'm assuming one might have been like the one that Marco found, and then another one was probably like the fucking creature in the woods and shit where those, you know, the girls found. I don't know exactly, but he said there was 2 creatures, right? One went to the military base, right, and the other one went to the hospital where these motherfuckers were, you know, experimenting on him or were doing whatever. So then he said that when they would the creature that was in the hospital, they performed a bunch of shit on it, right? And one of the things that they did was that they cut like his mouth open. I guess his mouth was shut when he died or whatever, and they said that they rolled out like his tongue and shit, and he described it as like long and flat and black. Like, that's a wild description, you know what I'm saying? But that's what he said. And here we go again. He said that it smelled like straight ammonia in there, bro, like a strong ass smell. And get this, bro, when they asked the description, he does not know those 3 little girls. It literally matched up with the exact same description that this girl like what these 3 little girls described it as. And that blows my mind. It's like, yo, this guy has no connection to those girls. This guy doesn't know them. So how does he describe something that is quote unquote not real, right? So like down to the T, like exactly how they described it. It's like, yo, this shit makes no sense, right? It's crazy. It's mind-blowing, I know. So then he said that 2 days after that I guess the creature maybe had died or something like that, and they put it into like a wooden casket, sealed the fuck out that shit, and then put it into a military truck that hauled it away. He said he didn't know what happened after that, but he like he guesses, right? Obviously they would probably take it to the military base where the other creature was at, that he said that he thinks that was still alive and shit. So one was dead, one was alive. I don't fucking know. So what's crazy to me, right, is that I think he's very credible, because like in some of his statements and shit, he gave out like a list of fucking names of people that were there that fucking day. Like, yo, this motherfucker was there and he did this. Like he said that there was a bunch of like military and doctors, and some people were even recording that shit. Like there's some footage out there, probably in some fucking government database somewhere, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's there, like it actually happened. So obviously, like every other thing in this world, right, people gossip and word gets out and shit. So obviously they dealt the hand of the government, the military at that time in Brazil, and they were like, no. They released a statement. They were like, no. Like, I don't know, like all these assumptions that people are making are ridiculous. Like, y'all really think there's some aliens and shit? They're like, this is a logical explanation to everything that's happened today. So they said, like, first of all, with the whole hospital thing, like this is all a training exercise. It's like, and then like they were hauling shit out for maintenance. Like it was just like cars taken to a garage and shit, like just spilling just straight bullshit. You're just like, well, this doesn't make sense. It's such a weird coincidence that a bunch of people are saying like weird shit that they're like seeing, and then you guys are also holding like a, you know, training exercise around this time. It just makes no sense to me, right? Now the hospital did come through and say like, oh yeah, there was a body being hauled out, but it was just some random teenager that actually like committed like, you know, at that time and shit like that, and that was basically it for that, you know what I'm saying? They were just like, nothing too serious, just standard protocol. So now later again down the line, there was an x-ray technician that was working at that hospital at that time, right? He said that he was always so scared to come through. Like they didn't even let this man like get filmed or nothing like that. I think they filmed like the back of his head when he was describing this thing, but he said that he treated the alien and shit, but the conditions in which he treated him were crazy, right? He described it as a like, they just barged in right into his fucking like I guess his workspace or whatever, and they were like, yo, we need you to take some x-rays of this thing, but you can't look at it, and then like when the job is done, you can't say nothing like about this to anybody. He's like, okay, bet. So he starts working on the alien, right? But he didn't know what it was, and he said that all the military people, they had guns and everything, they were just staring him down fucking eye to eye. They were like, yo, you can't look down, you can't be sus, don't look at the fucking x-rays after, just take x-rays, give it to us, you're gone. So that's what he did, and then after that he just never saw them again, right? And of course they threatened him like the original story. That's why I said the original story. They threatened him. They said, yo, if you ever say nothing to anybody, the consequence will be severe. Again, they put that shit in like, you know, certain terms where they're like, nah, we're not gonna kill you, but like, hey, it's severe and shit. So that scared him into ever speaking again. He didn't speak to nobody until like very recently and shit like that. So now this is when shit gets weird, right? Later down the line, I think it was like a couple like months after, the government made a statement, and this is where shit gets weird. They said that nothing even happened that day. They kind of like, I guess, backtracked a little on their word, because they said it was like a maintenance exercise. But then later they were like, yo, nothing happened that day. I don't know what you guys are talking about. They just went like, yo, nothing fucking happened. I don't know what you guys saw, but we weren't even out and about that day. Everything was so regular about that day. So now this gets even goofier, bro. If you think this shit doesn't get goofy, now it gets fucking goofy and even sus, right? So even a few years after this happened, people were still fucking skeptical about this. They're like, yo, you just kind of left us on a cliffhanger. You said nothing happened, but we have all these reports and shit. People coming like out and saying, yo, some crazy shit actually happened on January of 1996. So then they released a second statement. They were like, okay, we looked through our reports and shit, and it actually seems that the creature that everybody saw, right? And I'm gonna put this in quotations. These are not my words. What I'm about to say is not my words. They said the creature that they saw was a disfigured, mentally dwarf, bro. That's exactly what they said, down to their words. Not my words, bro. I would not say some crazy shit like that, right? And you're probably thinking like, what the fuck, bro? They actually said that was their actual statement, bro. Like, what kind of a weird cover up would that be, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? People are claiming they're seeing some crazy shit with horns or red eyes, but you're saying like, yeah, y'all saw some shit, but it was just a dwarf, bro. It was just some dude walking around. And they said that this dude had been like injured and shit, because you know how I said like in the beginning, all of them said like, oh, he was injured and shit. They said that he was injured because of like the rain and shit. Like there was hail at some points, and it was probably hit him in the fucking head or whatever, so he was all injured and shit. Like, you see how goofy this sounds? This is what makes it like sus, you know? Now you're probably thinking like, oh, what about the second creature? Wrong, bro. They said they had a thing for that too. They said that this dwarf had a wife, and guess what? That motherfucker was also another dwarf, you know what I'm saying? So it was basically this fucking dwarf. This is what they said. It was a dwarf couple just walking around town and shit, scaring the locals. They were, you know, mentally ill or whatever. So it's like people were not used to seeing people like that, and that was their shit. They were just like, this is what it is. And then finally in 2010, bro, it's still like, you know, a decade and a half later, bro, they're still getting pressed about this. They released a third and final statement. They were like, okay, look, the dwarf, we'll even give y'all the name. His name, that you guys can look it up right here on Google or whatever. The name was Mudino. That was a fucking Brazilian ass name if I've ever heard it, right? And they said, yeah, he was just a dwarf. This is what the girl saw. And they even took a picture of him. So I put a picture up on the screen. So look at that picture, and there's also a picture like of the sketch that people drew of what like the girls had described and shit. Like, and then, you know what I'm saying, they put it side by side. So what I'm thinking is that they were like, okay, hey, dwarf. They found a fucking random ass dwarf dude, and they're like, pose for this picture in this exact same way. And they took a picture of him. Like, that shit does not look like anything. You know what I'm saying? Look at this dude. Like, do you really, like, you know what I'm saying? Would you really say, like, oh, that's a motherfucking alien? No, bro. That's just a fucking cover-up. And till this day, like, to all of that shit, they stood by this story. They're like, this is it. We're not saying nothing more and all that shit. So that's basically it, bro. That was the story of Virginia UFO crash incident. This shit is crazy to me. Like, the evidence is so damning. Like, you know what I'm saying? From the little girls, and then I don't know if I explained it earlier, but I know this in my head. They were actually visited later by some like men in black and shit. They were saying like, yo, y'all, oh, you know what's crazy? Those people, right? They actually came to their house and they offered them a big sum of money to change up their story, you know what I'm saying? To make it seem like they were like just making shit up. And they didn't take it, bro. They were like, nah, you know what I'm saying? We're sticking by our story and shit. And then the guys like were like, all right, but hey, you better watch out. You know what I'm saying? They're like threatening, like little like low-key threats and shit. You know what I'm saying? They threatened them. They threatened the nurses, you know what I'm saying? Like, if all these people didn't like see some shit this day, why is everybody so hush about it, you know? You would think that the government would be like, ah, yeah, go ahead, say all this crazy shit, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, nothing even happened. What do we have to worry about, you know what I'm saying? If you don't have nothing to worry about, then you have nothing to hide. The craziest and most damning evidence to me was Marco, you know what I'm saying? The guy, the military officer who picked up the creature with his bare hands and then later fucking died, you know what I'm saying? He confessed to the fucking doctor saying, like, yo, I was involved in the capturing of a fucking extraterrestrial alien, bruh. On his deathbed, the last words you say on this earth is a confessional, you know what I'm saying? So now to wind this all down and wrap this all up, right? I'm gonna give my own like theory and shit. I genuinely believe, like, I've never heard a story like this. And you guys can feel free to, like, you know, Google shit about this. Like, it's very, very interesting. I'm pretty sure there's a movie on it, like a documentary that a guy made not too long ago. It's called The Phenomenon. And I did a bunch of research while doing this shit, bro. I listened to like a lot of podcasts of guys that really like literally went to Virginia, Brazil, and interviewed a bunch of the locals. Cause this shit did not happen that too long ago, bro. It was 1996, bro. That was like 3 years before I was born, you know. And I genuinely think that this shit happened, bro. Like, how is it that a bunch of people that have no connection with each other, right? They all have like similar stories, similar descriptions of the fucking creature that they saw, and everybody was asked to keep hush about it. Like, it's crazy, bro. I genuinely think that the Brazilian government has like some fucking aliens. And you know what's crazy? I didn't mention this until right now, right? A month after this incident in 1996, the Brazilian government actually made like some kind of a contract agreement with the United States government, saying that they would share any space related information and space related technology with the American government. Like, why the fuck, like, what a weird coincidence that a month after this happened, like, they then decided to sign some crazy shit like that out of the blue and all like that. I don't know, bro. This shit is damning to me. This shit is crazy to me. Like, I don't know. This I genuinely believe. Let me know in the fucking comments if you guys believe it, and if I made you guys like actually believe this shit, because I genuinely think that if anybody truly listened to this all the way through, and if I did a good job describing it, I don't know, this is my first time doing something like this, so you know, it might be a little shaky, whatever, but let me know in the comments, bro, if you genuinely like believe this shit, your favorite part, the craziest fucking part about this, the most sus part about it. And to wrap it all up again, I want to ask you guys to subscribe to the channel, bro. Next week, so this comes out, this is, if you're watching this, is on Halloween, it's a Halloween special. But next week I have my biggest guest today, bro. And I promise, bro, this is a big ass guest. Like, I'm actually shook that I got this shit. You know what I'm saying? Thank you guys for viewing and subscribing. Make sure to subscribe. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I'm fucking out. Solo Cup, baby.